Hello and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. Today on the Focusing Way podcast, we introduce you to Anastasia Brensick and Jack Blackburn. Both are focusing trainers who are exploring new and interesting ways of including focusing as part of their daily work. Customarily, in focusing, we do not associate physical touch with the practice. It would not normally be considered to be part of a focusing exchange or partnership. Adding physical touch could break an implied touch barrier and could possibly infringe on the safety of the boundaries set out in focusing practice and partnership as most of us understand it. Anastasia and Jack are both body workers. Anastasia holds a master's in applied psychophysiology and an undergrad degree in social work. Jack holds a master's degree in counseling. Jack, among other things, is a teacher of body workers and other caregivers, and Anastasia, among other things, teaches body workers and has a background as a social worker in domestic violence. Both are licensed massage practitioners and have taught professional classes combining touch and focusing. What happens when we add focusing to the bodywork practice and appropriate touch to a focusing practice? Jack and Anastasia have come together to create focusing courses for body workers and using focusing to create a bridge between body workers and verbal therapists. Their goals are first to enable more client empowerment and body-centered awareness. Second, to use the principles of focusing to support mutual understanding between the different caregiving professions. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy this discussion on incorporating focusing into bodywork, and listen as Jack and Anastasia share the small miracles they've felt through their hands and in their whole being by bringing a focusing way into their body healing practices. I mean, are you describing a situation like, I won't say this as you, but a practitioner might get in their thinking that while they're working on somebody, that this person, has a lot of emotion to release and they probably need a really good cry or something.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean? Like when you're describing what you were just describing?
Yeah, one of many ways. So that would be an example. The person has a barrel chest and you can tell that they're bracing against something and there's something going on there, and you want to put your hands right on the chest so that they can come into the crying and then emote and then feel better.
Mm-hmm.
That really is a disservice, because that means that we are not including what it is that is not wanting to come forth, that's wanting to keep it there,
Mm-hmm.
to notice the body sensations in that particular moment. Because, when the body has defenses, I want to support that. I want to say yes, because that person is, of course, doing the best they can with what they've got. And we want to let them know that whatever defenses that they're using work. They're helping them in some way, whether we know it, whether we know what it is or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to support that until they feel like they don't need that anymore.
Would you say that pain would be included in that category? Like that the pain has a role and it's there for purpose, and you honor that, and it's doing its part in the defense of the organism of the whole, and you would honor it, and you wouldn't just sort of go to the area to heal it or exercise it or something.
Well, yes, any sensation, any awareness that comes, we honor it equally. Now, I also want to meet the client where they are. So if they're saying, I've tried everything with this hip pain and I can't, there's nothing that's moving it forward and it feels like it wants to move forward, then I'll come into that area and say, okay, let me meet you where you are. You meet me on the inside, and meet where my hands are, and I'm going to have my hand on you, and I will meet where you are inside. And sometimes it's at skin layer, at the skin level, and sometimes it's at the bone level, which often tells me something more about what the physical body is doing too. Because I also have, anatomy in my head, and I'm realizing, oh, this, I can sense that there's something going on where the ligament is, or the bone isn't really moving in the way in which a common hip bone would move, the joint would move. Okay, so I put that in the back of my mind. I don't automatically assume, oh, so that must mean that there's a, hip issue, a bursitis or whatever. I'm just going to put it in the back of my mind and notice that and see if their awareness coming in helps shift that environment. Not wanting to make the pain go away, but letting the pain inform us what more we need to know that's not in our conscious knowing.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about your presence and what your sort of presence needs to be when you approach a client in this kind of way, where you're not as a healing professional having somebody lie down on a table and have a sort of standard Swedish massage or something. So just tell me about what it is like for each of you, like the kind of quality of presence you bring to your practice.
Sure. So both Jack and I practice differently. So I find that to be really, really lovely in any teaching situation. I always learn something new with Jack. I hope he learned some things from me too. But I certainly know that. Thanks, Jack. But definitely it's a good mix for students. And I just want to say that for sure, because I'd want to be our student. So I come from a rehab, more treatment-focused background, working in integrative clinics and chiropractors' offices and things like that before I came into my own private practice, and did mostly insurance work until the last 7 years, something like that. So, so my goal was to, see the person, they have something that needs to be fixed, and then I do some things that I think would help fix it, and then I see what the progress is. So that's been the underlying theme. Now, in integrating my new awareness about focusing and my own practice in focusing, realizing that a lot of that wanting to fix is coming from me. I want to be the one that helps the person feel better, because I want everyone to feel good in the world. I mean, that's my calling in the world, is to be of service and to love people and to help them. So when someone's out of pain and they go, oh my gosh, it's a miracle, I'm going to tell all my friends, my ego is completely inflated with that, right? However, the healing has nothing to do with me, and I use my practice to remember that that what I notice with that body and how I can articulate that to the person helps them become their own student to their own body and what comes from that, and that they can learn how to support and heal themselves, or using me to help them heal themselves with the tools that I have. So someone comes in, they say, I've got this back pain, I do ibuprofen, I do all these things, and it's not working, or I've done nothing and I'm all out of options, a little Homer Simpson joke. And and they come and I say, okay, look, I want to use all my skills to help you be pain-free, whatever that means for you. Now, healing doesn't necessarily mean pain goes away. I just kind of plug that in, but say we're going to get curious about it, because whatever's happening, there's something we're not getting. There's a message we're not getting. So let's see what we can do. So oftentimes there are people that come that either know pain or no pain. they really have no articulation about all the sensations that are in between that or around it.
Mm-hmm.
So, so sometimes the work, quote unquote work, is about becoming more aware about all the different sensations. So I might say, okay, maybe show me where the pain is, and they can point to the pain. I say, okay, can you find the place where the pain is and where the pain isn't? So there's the pain in this area. So where's the wall? Where's the place where then it's not pain anymore? So then they can start noticing that there's more information here for them. Oh, I didn't realize it doesn't go all the way down my leg. It actually stays right here. And this sensation down my leg is more of a stiffness. Oh, okay. So the pain is more here. So we're gathering language to then support them knowing this area further.
Mm-hmm.
And in this whole practice, and there's all these other things that we do too, but in that relationship that we have between both of us being curious about this third body, and I say that knowing that we don't have language that includes body, mind, spirit without separating, but knowing in this way, the way the body is articulating information and wanting us to know things through sensing,
Mm-hmm.
we might come into realizing, oh, this part is really stiff and this part is really lax. So noticing that, maybe finding new ways of moving comes from that knowing. I'm not going to say, oh, you might want to stretch this out. It's, oh, so what does that tell us? Where are we now? And oftentimes the homework, as they say in the field, the thing that the person will take home and do in the week and then come back and see what happens, what we find the next week, they come up on their own. Like, oh, I think I'll stretch, this area out and just see what happens with the back. And then they'll notice, oh my gosh, there's a shift that's happening when I stretch out the anterior hip space.
Right.
My back pain changes.
Right.
Wonderful.
And they're participating in their healing rather than relying on only you to provide it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because that's where if I tell them the things that I've learned, so many times the homework doesn't get done because it's not their awareness. It's somebody telling them what to do because I know what your body should and shouldn't be doing, which
Mm-hmm.
is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so many, I could go on and on about that. But.
I want to go back a little bit because when Anastasia was talking about cathartic work, I'm a little older than she is, and I remember when cathartic work was the theme. It originally came from Wilhelm Reich. It was the whole idea that when you have a big emotional release that includes a body release, then somehow there's healing implied in that. But also, just as Anastasia was saying, it doesn't last. There was some idea, and Rolfing, early Rolfing also incorporated that idea that, we're going to take care of those releases in every possible part of the body. It goes also to the question of whether or not stuff is stored in the body. And Anastasia came at this in her way. Neither one of us believe in that. The body's the servant of the mind. And as the mind shifts from theme to theme, the body accompanies those shifts and gives us, once again, the feeling awareness of those shifts. So even in the bodywork world, people have incorporated this idea of cathartic release. Upledger in his later years was talking about somato-emotional release in the body, and that you had these places, and he would go into a place that was tight, and he'd say, so notice what you're feeling here and tell me what it reminds you of. So he's basically doing kind of a pop psychology approach to the person on the table. Mm-hmm. And many body workers have gone in that direction, even though, it's not it's not really that valid in terms of what's actually taking place in the client themselves. Once again, you're suggesting that they have to follow a certain path. The other thing I would add, and I do this, especially if someone has pain that's left over in their body after a session, and that is to actually teach them and help them describe their pain as well as they can, because the closer they come to actually describing the pain, the less the pain signal is necessary for their reality. And it's very interesting how that happens. They can feel it and they can approach it. And once they get to that place where they really can describe what it feels like, not what caused it, not, some story that they've held on to about that pain, but what it actually feels like right now, they are changing their relationship with the pain.
By describing the feeling and not the cause of the pain.
Exactly. Yeah. And using words that are really good words. Is it a hot pain? Is it a sharp pain? Is it a cold pain? Is it icy? Is it achy? Whatever they come up with in describing, the closer they come to really describing what they're feeling, first of all, once again, the fear melts away. Most of us do not want to go where we feel the pain. That's the last place we want to experience. So I just want to say that that's not how I always work, but that's part of my understanding, is that the pain is something, it's a physical sensation, it's a reality, and if we have if our mind's not telling us don't go there because it could be something really bad, if we come in, if we have the courage to go beyond those kinds of messages and actually go into that experience, something very profound happens for that person. There's a very, very strong shift that can take place for that person.
Or just saying hello to the one that's the worry.
Yes.
There's a worry about what might happen, and what really gets fun is when someone just starts to describe their pain as lonely or isolated, and that's when focusing comes in really, really handy.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then a couple of other things I would just want to add to this. Gendlin's notion of the core of the body, Anne teaches that in her classes. Where is the core? The core is basically where all the emotions lie, and it's synonymous with the alimentary canal.
Right.
So the body uses the alimentary canal in a certain way. The mind uses the alimentary canal in a very different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because somewhere they interact as well. It's just like as you're describing, the worried one is using that same channel as where the pain might be lying, or the emotion resulting from the pain might be sitting in a different part of that. Like people might have a sick feeling in their stomach because of shoulder pain they have, while they've got a worry in there that's showing up in their as a headache, let's say. Is that what you mean? Like that it's using the same channel to express different. It's almost like that's the loudspeaker. Like that canal is the loudspeaker where everything flows.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The other thing that lies along the alimentary canal is the chakras.
Right.
And I teach chakra awareness, but I'm not having people cleanse their chakras or anything. I'm not holding pendulums over chakras or anything like that, but just that basically when they're happy, when they're sad, and so on, the the emotions have responses along the alimentary canal. What is the body doing with that? The alimentary canal is from the mouth to the anus. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the canal of intake, process, and letting go. And so once again, as I was talking about that bad dinner, the the mind uses it in quite a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I will do often is if somebody is really fearful, generally that shows up mainly in the solar plexus. And so I will often, as I'm working with them, have them put their hands on their solar plexus
Mm-hmm.
and just breathe into their hands, feel into their hands, and then notice what comes up. Uh, and once again, what comes up is a focusing process, but they're actually doing the physical part of that process as well.
Mm.
Um, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me, yeah. One thing about the dinner story you told that I'd like to share is in part
Yeah.
of my whole thing with living in a focusing way, which is apply focusing anywhere and anytime you can. So I very often will even sit down in a restaurant, and if that thing comes over me where something doesn't feel right, I leave.
Mm,
Like
Hmm.
I no longer sort of allow the social norms or the things we're sort of trained to do. It's not. I don't do it impolitely. I just usually stand up and say, "No, I'm sorry. I've had a change of heart on this. I've got, I'm gonna choose somewhere else." And
Hmm.
that's not always easy with your companion, but but I've not done it enough times to know that I should have listened.
mm,
So it's a
mm.
different kind of listening, but that's when you were telling that story, Jack. I was saying, oh yeah, there's been plenty of times where I've stood up and just kind of, or walked, like put one foot into a place and sort of turned around and said, no, it's not going to be this place. Just
Yes.
on the sense of like, and I'll go back to that saying of appelle, like what you feel at the skin level.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice kind of awareness to have. Um,
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to comment that what you're saying is that you take a moment and sense inwardly about how it is for you in that moment, and in that pause, it kind of, so I take it in my experience, and we have here in the United States, of course, Charlottesville, and there's Black Lives Matter still marching, and all these things that remind me of my own white privilege, and this is my experience that I'm going off of here, and that I notice that I have when I pause and notice my surroundings, there's something in me that takes a breath or holds my breath when there are teenage boys around, and I don't know what that's about, but to allow myself to pause in that moment and notice that,
mm-hmm,
and realize what might be moving me is a part of me that has had an experience, or something that someone else has said to me about them or whatever.
mm-hmm,
Um, and that doesn't mean that I don't move from that place, but I move from a place where I am allowing my conscious awareness to become informed with all these other ways of knowing this situation. So when you talk about the pause, it's like, yeah, that's right. This is so great, and I can choose to leave.
mm-hmm,
Mm, mm. There's three terms that are really interesting in terms of body awareness. One is proprioception, which is often defined as just knowing where you are in space. And that's very different than proprioception, where you're actually coming into a particular part of the body. Not only are you feeling it, but you're interacting with that part of the body. That's very much what I do in my work, is teach the client they can actually interact, not only breathe in, but they can actually touch from inside that part of the body. They can enlarge and contract that part of the body. There's all kinds of ways that a person can interact. And when they use their verbal description of what they feel there, that's a whole other way of propriocepting that part of the body. There's two other terms that now are being used more and more commonly. One is interoception. That means what are you feeling inside your body? A lot of times people apply it only to the abdomen, but it's not true. There's a body state inside that you feel, and I would say in focusing, that's what's accompanying the changes that are going on in our minds. As we're processing, we're using interoception to get a sense of body feeling awareness. The other one, which is the one you described, David, is exteroception. What are we feeling outside the body? Actually, both of you did with the teenage boys in the restaurant and so on. We get a external perception of our environment, and that causes a feeling awareness inside of us as well. So we're very much connected to all of those ways of perceiving.
Yes.
All the time.
Yeah. And when I apply that to what, like the next step of my sort of living in a focusing way is when I do sit down at the restaurant where I am going to eat and I look at the menu, one of the first things I do is ask my body what it wants to be fed. Right? And this goes back to breaking bread or blessing food. I mean, there's a lot of sort of intention work happening there too. But as part of that sort of the living experiment that I'm doing of sort of living in a focusing way, I very often really say, what do I really want to have? Like what? And then when I'm down to a choice, then I'll sort of sense in for that. And then it's like, then it's coming from a place of acknowledging the body and nourishing and being in relationship in that way, where it's like, I'm acknowledging my body by sensing deeply for what kind of nourishment it's wanting maybe in this moment, and trying to deepen that relationship somehow. And I think it's probably the kind of, I think maybe Olympic athletes or maybe people who are sort of use their body in a 100% kind of way in whatever thing they're doing, might have that higher awareness more often than like the average person walking down the street. But I still always think it's a very good thing to bring, because we aren't walking around our heads disconnected, disembodied, mind from heart, or and so there's I'm always trying to sort of find that perfect integration. You guys have been really wonderful, and I know we've been on for a while, but could we do one more question?
Sure.
Yeah.
I really, there was something as I was reading through some of the stuff you guys sent me that one sentence sort of struck me, and it was about end of life experience. And I wanted to put it to either one of you about what it's like to combine focusing with end of life experience, and if it feels okay to share that, what that was like.
Well, both Jack and I have had experiences working with people at their end of life, and for me, it was my mother-in-law, and she had a heart attack actually a year ago, just a couple days ago. And she was in the hospital. She had had a heart attack, and they revived her, but that it wasn't enough, so that her organs were starting to shut down. So she had a week of just up and down, but always unconscious. And so she'd be on dialysis because her kidneys stopped functioning, and she'd swell up, and they'd have to do that. And it was a horrible thing to watch. And everyone was so worried. They weren't quite sure what she would want at this point, because, you know, if she did survive, she would have to be on dialysis for the rest of her life. And at some point they were talking about something in her gut, so she might have needed a feeding tube for the rest of her life. And she loved food, and she loved wine and food and good conversation. And would that be the quality of life that she wanted? So in the hospital room, I spoke with her, and I said, you know, Sandra, I know, you know, all this, I don't know where you are, but I just want to know if you're here with us, and I'm going to lay my hand on your shoulder, and if it's okay, maybe you could meet me from inside and touch my hand. And like I had mentioned before, in felt shift, her tissue softened, it warmed, the fascia change happened. It was a beautiful, wonderful. It was almost like she touched my hand, and then it touched directly to my heart. So even the energy of her touching my hand was coming through. It was bright. It was warm. I would describe it as the word happy, joyful. Not what I had thought it would be, which was scared, you know, help me, kind of shaky, hard. It wasn't happening that way, and that was such a surprise to me. So that helped us through her transition, because then the next day she passed. We told her we were going to take the tube out, and she was okay with that from this connection that we had. And she left quickly after that, which sometimes doesn't happen. So it felt good to be in that presence with her.
What a gift.
Yeah.
I had the same experience with a 93-year-old woman that I had worked on for 12 years. Worked with her, and 7 hours before she died, she was unable to speak. They'd been giving her morphine for pain, but I was so used to working with her that I told her I was going to do the speaking because I knew she couldn't speak. And what I asked her to do was to come into parts of her body where she could feel my hand, and she could do that. And once again, just like Anastasia said, there was a whole shift, a whole change that was happening in that tissue from her coming in, and then I would mirror back to her what I could feel. And what was happening was I was giving her a one-way focusing experience, in a sense, because I could mirror back what, which we do as a companion in focusing. I could mirror back what I was feeling, what I was hearing inside. That was my first experience. I wound up later on working in palliative care units in hospitals in Japan, where I had somebody interpreting for me, but in a sense, the person, I wasn't doing that much touch, just touch in order to, once again, have them feel into that part of their body. It was like, this one woman who had brain cancer, who she could speak, but it was inarticulate in a lot of cases. So my interpreter was doing the best she could with what this woman was saying. And she had been unable to, with her left arm, she'd been unable to touch her head or her face or anything like that. And I told her exactly what I was going to do. I said, I'm just going to weigh your left arm, your left shoulder and so on. And then I'm going to follow you. And she took me right up to the top of her head. She touched her face. She did all these other things. Um, and she was kind of nonplussed by the whole experience. I mean, she was totally beside herself. She was giggling and doing all these things, and I wasn't. I was just following her. I literally was not making this happen. I was just following her inner instructions. And then at the end of the session, she said. She said. I'm so grateful that you were so gentle and so peaceful because you're a foreigner.
Ah.
And everybody in the room kind of laughed at that. She was much an older woman, so she'd gone through the war and all that.
Yeah.
Her version of foreigners. Anyway, it was so wonderful to be able to follow her without her telling me what to do at all. Yeah. So.
Wow. Such beauty. I have to take a moment to really sort of appreciate this time we've had together, and appreciating you both so much for taking this time and for sharing. And just really want to say thank you to both of you.
And David, I wanted to thank you so much for doing these podcasts and keeping all of us really excited and enlivened by all the ways in which focusing can be in our lives. My hat's off to you. I thank you so much gratitude for keeping focusing alive in the world.
I would mirror that same gratefulness, David. I can really perceive how sensitive you are, and how you're able to. The greatest gift we can give another human being is to listen. And you are an amazing listener.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. You've been listening to The Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please visit our website at thefocusingway.com.